Welcome to the Pre-NAB Editors Lounge. I'm Deborah Kaufman, your moderator. I should let you know that this is the first ever Editors Lounge we've done remotely. We're going to see how this one goes. Maybe we'll do it again in the future. You never know. But it is not the first time that NAB has been canceled. I'm sure you've read that it was canceled post-war because all the hotels were taken by the government for the soldiers. So we've had a canceled NAB before, and we are going to talk about the canceled NAB since we are here to talk about NAB. I'm Deborah Kaufman, as I said, and before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. We are, unlike the in real person Editors Lounge, we are not going to take a break. So feel free to help yourself to whatever refreshments you have at home and take a break whenever you like. You will be able to ask us questions. Yes, some of us here have adult beverages. You will be able to ask us questions, which is should be the chat box on the right-hand side of the YouTube feed that you're looking at. So we'll try and answer all of your questions. And I'd like to thank Alpha Dog Editorial and Key Code Media for organizing and producing this. And also thanks to Avid for the Zoom connection for this entire event. A special welcome to all of you who are watching Editors Lounge from outside of Los Angeles. I know we've had those people from outside LA watch on the stream before, but presumably we've gotten more of you and you are all welcome. Panelists are, to my direct right, is Jeff Sangpeel of Key Code Media. Wave your hand, Jeff. Hey, there he is.
Hello.
Next to him is Terry Curran of Alpha Dog Editorial. That's him in the beach.
Oh, I have to talk, right?
Well, you can wave your hand anyway.
To get it up. Beautiful downtown Burbank. I look just like Jeff.
You do. And next to him is Mark Rodanis from Boone and Murray. He's the one who's looking very serious.
Hello, everybody. I'm not that serious.
No, all right. You're the one that's drinking wine, exactly.
Cheers. Yes, I am. Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh, excellent. And then next to him is Katie Henson, who is executive producer at Nice Shoes. So, okay, there she is. So why don't we start with Katie, because we ended with Katie, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Oh, hi. So I'm Katie Henson. I am currently the executive producer at Nice Shoes, and I run all of the DI and dailies facilities across North America for the department that does episodic and features. The company has been doing commercials for a long time. Episodic and features is pretty new. So that's what I'm doing. My day job, essentially for the last 5 years, has been building and running post facilities around the world. But before that, I spent a good 20 years kind of working my way up the post industry. So I did a bit of everything: offline editing, online editing, visual effects, color. I was a finishing artist for a really long time. And I also spent the last decade being one of those people that kind of thinks a lot about the future and gives you all a really good sense of what might be happening in the next 10 years. So I tend to be looking at things in about 10 years in the future, as opposed to more like next year. I couldn't really tell you what's happening next year.
Well, we're gonna be talking a lot about the future and business models, so you'll be perfect for that. And I do want to catch up about the Blue Collar Post Collective, but yay, she's wearing the t-shirt. We'll talk about that in a bit. I want to make sure to cover that. So, all right, Mark, tell us about yourself, what you do.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Rodanis. I'm the SVP of post-production at Buena Murray Productions. We're a reality TV company, all reality all the time. And we pioneered the reality genre with MTV's The Real World back in 1992.
Oh my God, so long ago.
It is. Yes, I'm that old. And we, at any given time, we have anywhere from 5 to 10 different shows in post-production at the moment. And that's what I do.
Great.
I think this is probably my 15th Editors Lounge appearance.
Aha, yeah, you've been a regular. Well, Terry, tell us a little, which number Editors Lounge, NAB Editors Lounge is this?
This is number 17. 17 years we've been doing this.
They're regular. Well, Terry, tell us a little, which number Editors Lounge, NAB Editors Lounge is this?
This is number 17. 17 years we've been doing this.
They're regular. Well, Terry, tell us a little, which number Editors Terry, why don't you tell us Editors Lounge is this?
Someone has a YouTube page open.
Yeah,
Not
it's
me.
throwing me off.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, me too.
Not me.
No YouTube page open. Terry, tell me about Alpha Dog Editorial and what you guys do there.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll give you a quick background. I've been in the business for over 30 years and started in production, ended up going into, well, did my own no budget film in college and the feature basically, and then went to working in production and then post. And I started working at a company called Match Frame. I was employee number 1 there. Went all the way through till we started Alpha Dogs back in 2002. And we're primarily a finishing post house. We do color correction, audio mixing, visual design, etc. We also have offline rental suites. And then in 2003, I started Editors Lounge because I thought it would be great to have a place just for editors to come together, hang out, share tips and tricks, network, etc. And believe it or not, it's still going, which is amazing to me.
I think it's really wonderful. I think everybody who knows Editors Lounge knows that it's a real community service, and I encourage people that might never come to it but are listening to this to try and come down for the next one.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Jeff, tell us about what you do at Keycode Media.
Sure. I'm Jeff Sangpil. I'm the chief technologist here at Keycode Media, and I got a little beef with Terry.
Uh-oh.
We
all have a beef with Terry.
He didn't update my calendar invite. I'm here waiting for you guys to show up. Get your bottle ready. So, I mean, come on, guys. So basically what I started at Keycode a little over a year ago. Spent a long career in building facilities, dealing with rental, broadcast. I mean, I've done basically about every part of post-production there is to be done. Worked on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, American Idol, General Hospital. Basically almost any genre I've kind of been in it. And what I do now, well, what I did before 2 weeks ago is, I was talking to people about high-end finishing and facilities and that sort of stuff. And what I've done the last 2 weeks is have the same conversation over and over and over and over again about how to do remote editorial. So I'm well grooved. We're ready.
And we are going to talk about remote editorial. Just so all of you know who don't know me, I'm about a 30-plus year journalist in this industry. I've always covered technology. I currently write the daily newsletter for USC's Entertainment Technology Center. So, pre-NAB, ordinarily, in an ordinary year, we'd be sitting here talking about who's going to NAB and what we're going to look at here. So, I know that Terry has sworn off NAB, so maybe you want to start. You would not be going this year anyway, even if it wasn't canceled, right, Terry?
Yes, NAB kind of became irrelevant to me. I don't know, whatever it was, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I go to the HBA Tech Retreat every year, which is where I get a concentrated, sort of like the TED Talks of our industry, and I get a concentrated connection with people that work in my area and also get broad exposure to new things that are coming up and in the future. I love Jeff keeps changing his backplate. It's too funny. Sorry, folks,
Very
you're
funny.
not seeing it. And so I came down to when we used to go to NAB, it was to see what the new stuff up and coming was going to be. Well, we see all that on the internet long before it comes out. Making connections with the people that I know from around the world. Well, with social media, that's instantaneous every day. So there kind of is no real reason for me to go there. And then it's Vegas, so that part, I could definitely avoid that.
You may have been a pioneer, but I'm sure that some of our panelists were planning on going. Who among you were, Katie, you're nodding your head, Mark, you too, Jeff, all of you were planning on going. So tell me about what you were planning on, what you hope to do and see at NAB. Katie,
Well,
you want to start?
Sure.
Oh,
Yeah, sure.
All right, or Jeff.
I was planning on going, and I go whenever I can. I also like to go to not just NAB, but some of the other trade shows and NAB in other countries. NAB Shanghai is really different, for example, to NAB Vegas. And for me in my job, it's, you know, I think that in order to really see what's going to happen in the next 10 years, I have to be seeing what's happening outside of our little bubble of Post, and especially our little bubble of America. You know, I'm still really frustrated by people in America wondering, you know, arguing that 8K may or may not be a thing when half of Asia has been on 8K for several years. And so I think that it's really, you know, I think it's one of those things to get outside my bubble that I find it really useful. And so I spend a lot of time on the other floors. I look at what's happening in other areas of our industry. I love the part of it where you see what people are inventing. I walk around right around the edges and you see the little one-man band who's invented something really crazy. You know, that sort of stuff for me is really why I go, because it inspires me to think outside our little, you know, box of what we do every day in terms of really where the innovation's happening.
So it sounds a little bit like didn't have plans to visit particular vendors, more you wanted to go and discover people you hadn't seen before. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's usually why I go. Like Terry says, we can always find out really easily what the vendors that we work with day to day are going to do and put out. They tell us all that stuff on the internet. But the reason why I like to go to Vegas is for the stuff that I won't find out that way.
Okay, that makes sense. Jeff, what were you planning on doing or seeing at NAB?
Well, I mean, part of the thing is with working with KeyCode, it's going to see customers as opposed to going to see vendors. I mean, my thing always has been go out there and you're able to talk to Sony, you're able to talk to Avid, you're able to talk to Blackmagic. You can go around and talk with individual vendors in the space of, you know, a day and a half and get all those meetings over and done with. And, you know, sometimes, sorry, one of the things that also is really good in those meetings is, you know, the meeting's not on the floor. So you're back in a whisper suite and they're showing you their roadmap for the next, you know, 2-3 years as to where they think products are going to go. And what's funny is, yes, that could be done online, because I've been getting some of that lately because everyone knows that NAB is gone. But it's something where it kind of was the only place where that really would happen up front.
So you would see major vendors there and get the inside scoop?
Yeah, you just get the, you know, some inside scoop and some, you know, NDA type meetings. And then the other thing is, you know, head over to the North Hall and, you know, see the 8K pavilion and that sort of stuff and take pictures and send them to Terry and, you know, basically tell him here's what the future's going to be. You better get with it, man.
Okay, last but not least, Mark, you were planning on going, right?
I was going, and I'm really pissed that I'm not going to get my cheap Southwest flights ever refunded because I went for the low price.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Anyway, no, like Katie, I like going to the outside, you know, where the little one person booths are. That's where you find the interesting technology. That's always interesting. The major vendors, let's face it, we're LA based and we have a chance to interact with them all year long. So that's less important to me. It's more about the connecting with people and the free booze and dinners. What could I tell you?
Yep, I understand. So as pretty much right after it was canceled, I started getting all kinds of messages from the PR folks that handled a big variety of companies asking me, would you be interested in a virtual meeting? And quite a number of them have created Zoom meetings similar to this, where they are going to give their dog and pony show. Have you guys been getting such emails? And yes, Mark?
Well, yeah, I mean, I attended one from Teradici on point to what we're talking about tonight, which is remote editing. And, you know, it was really informative. I mean, it's similar to what you would, you know, walk around the hall, sit down, but you don't have the distraction and the noise of 5 other booths around you competing for your attention. So I've already attended some of those, and they're just as informative, but you do miss the face-to-face interaction.
Right.
And the AJA party.
And the
Yeah,
AJA party,
exactly.
right.
Which
What about
became
Katie?
the B&H party, which is no longer a party. It's, you know, it's been handed off so many times, nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So Jeff, have you gone to any of these Zoom meetings with manufacturers?
Well, as soon as NAB canceled, my phone started ringing, and it wasn't with that. It's been, I was actually down in Phoenix, sitting at a brainstorm of the product, the virtual set folks meeting, and all of a sudden, the phone starts going nuts. It's clients, it's the folks here from KeyCode, talking about, holy crap, what are we going to do? So there's been a lot of stream of meetings that I've seen come along. And, we've had a lot of people coming to us, via all sorts of methods, LinkedIn and Facebook, and, just general email saying, hey, we'd like to get a little bit of your time. Like we just had a meeting with sat down with the Bird Dog folks today, and they went over some of their cloud workflows, which, is interesting. Because the thing is, a lot of people have come along at the beginning and said, oh, we just wanted to get your attention. And now it's like, no, time is... For a lot of people, time is finite. There's not that much, and there's only so many topics people need to talk about right now, and they're basically saying, I don't have time to talk about virtual sets right now. I need to talk about how I'm going to be able to continue my business.
Remote editing.
Katie, let's not get there yet. Katie, we're still on the question of getting tapped by manufacturers to see things we ordinarily would have seen in Vegas. And Katie, I know, wanted to say something about that. So Katie.
When you first mentioned the questions about where your approach to do things online that you would have done at NAB, I know that as a speaker at NAB, I was asked whether I wanted to do my presentations online.
Ah, okay. What were you going to speak about?
There was a BCPC panel event, and that was really popular last year. It was going to be happening again this year. And I was going to be presenting along with Kylie Pena, the current president of the BCPC, doing a deep dive into how we actually run the organization and using some of our quite unique business models.
Well, maybe this is the perfect moment for you to tell us a little bit what BCPC is.
If you don't know, where have you been? It's the Blue Collar Post Collective is the largest nonprofit of its kind in the world. We have about 15,000 members, work globally, and we are essentially a community of post people at every level, dedicated to bringing back the idea of community, helping out each other, and really supporting emerging talent in our industry. Mm-hmm. We have about 20 different programs that go on at once. And we also, one of the massive programs that we have is the PDAP program. So we actually have a fund where 100% of the donations that we gather from around the community, because the entire organization is volunteer run, the donations actually go into a fund where we pay for low income post professionals to actually go to things like NAB. So we actually work with the various organizations putting on these events around the US. And we also make sure that the people not only get their accommodation and travel and passes paid for, but we also set them up with mentors on the ground. We give them special tours. I was going to do tours of the show floor for the PDAP recipients who were in color and online. So we do all kinds of things like that, which is really, really special. And our recipients, unfortunately, for this year's NAB were announced right before NAB looked like maybe it wasn't going to happen. So before they even cancelled, we actually allowed the PDAP recipients to make a choice to defer to next year or to another event. And then, of course, the choice was made essentially for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks. Terry, you're the last one. I know that you don't go to NAB every year, so I'm curious, over the past years, have you caught up, Terry, with the various manufacturers? Have you set up online meetings with them, or?
Yeah, well, again, the HPA Tech Retreat, which comes 2 months earlier because it comes in February, you're right there with the high-end people, the engineers, basically, from the manufacturers. So you can really get questions answered in a more thorough way than you can at NAB.
And does Cinegear fill that role as well?
Yeah, Cinegear does, but that's mostly production. I mean, it's definitely production focused. Okay. So it doesn't help us as much. But one of the things, obviously, I'm saying this as somebody who lives in Southern California in the Los Angeles area. If I want to talk to somebody at Blackmagic, I go to the Blackmagic building in Burbank. If I want to talk to somebody at Sony, I go to
Right.
Culver City. You know,
Okay.
that is different. So I might have a different opinion if I lived in Wyoming. You know, NAB would probably
Yeah.
be more valuable. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, now we come to remote tools that you might be using. I'm curious if we're going to definitely go to Mark's favorite topic, remote editing. But I'm curious if have you had Zoom meetings with clients?
Oh my God.
All right. Do tell, Mark.
I've had more Zoom meetings in the last 2 weeks. So let me just say that we are into day 15. We started Thursday 2 weeks ago, going 100% remote. Probably, you know, by Monday of 2 weeks ago, we were 100% out of the building. So we've been out for 2 weeks now, and that equates to about 1,500 Zoom meetings over the last couple of weeks. Zoom is an incredible tool to communicate with everybody, but that's not really sort of what we're talking about. I think most people want to know about remote editing. And I know Jeff has a lot to say about this, but I want to say this first, and that is we need to define what we mean by remote editing.
All right, why don't you give that a stab, Mark?
Good luck. It's different things to different people. So if you're working on a scripted feature film, your idea of remote editing is much different than somebody working on a reality show as part of a large team. So you got to really be clear as to what you mean by remote. Is it review and approval? Is it what I call behind the back viewing of what you're doing? Or is it actually working on the media as an editor, touching the keys and moving stuff? Each one of those scenarios requires a different tool. And Bunim/Murray has successfully sent about 120 editors out of the building in the last 2 weeks. And in order to do that, we've used multiple different tools, everything from SneakerNet to HP RGS. We're talking about Teradici, it's on the way. And then we also use VPN and Sony C and plain email and all these other things. So it's not just everyone, you know, you look at the boards and everybody wants, what's the easiest solution to do remote editing? It's not that easy.
Well, let's dig down a little deep into exactly how you're using it. I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about what you found out from Teradici's, you know, dog and pony show, what they're showing, what are they bringing to the party?
Sure, it's expensive.
It's
expensive and it's complicated and it requires a pretty hefty IT participation because you're talking about virtualization of media composers and all this. And, you know, it requires, not everybody can do it, but the results are above what most people are dealing with right now. You get, you know, UHD, 1920 by 1080, 30 frames a second, pretty good looking video out at the other end, depending on your internet connectivity. So I would say that's at the high end of expectation of what people can do.
Okay.
But I would say for most people watching this, it's probably not a realistic option at this point.
Well, tell us a little bit about what does remote editing look like at Bunim/Murray? What are you doing there?
SneakerNet, down and dirty.
Really?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's cheap. It works.
Yeah.
Well, walk me through how you do it. I mean, okay, SneakerNet, but walk me through.
SneakerNet means.
How many editors do you have working remotely? You said 120?
About that, yeah.
Yeah.
So going back, we got started on this easily 4 or 5 weeks ago. I got to give our CEO, Gil Goldschein, a tremendous amount of credit. He was on a business trip to Europe. He came back, I think, when was Valentine's Day, like February 14th, like a week before that. So early in February, he came back and said, get prepared. And I took that as like, okay, let's do it. And we started thinking, what can we do next week? And there were a lot of other options, but none of them were in-house available immediately. SneakerNet, which for everyone who's listening is take a copy of your media, the whole media pool, make a copy, take it offline, take it home. Okay, so you have a duplicate copy of your media from here and here. You work elsewhere, and then you bring it together. So our media pools are in the neighborhood of 20 terabytes per show. So we spent it took us almost 2.5 days to get that media off of our Avid Nexus and onto individual drives. And once we made that, we made 1 copy, which made 2 copies, which made 4 copies, which made probably about 30, 40 copies for 1 show. And excuse me. So that's what we did. We told everybody, take a copy of the media. And here's the other thing, take the editing system out of your bay and take it home. I don't care if, we'll figure out how to get it back later. Take your editing system home. And that may seem like a generous offer, but it actually solved a lot of problems for us. We had the exact same Avid version. We had the exact same Mac OS. We had a system that we knew worked yesterday, so it should work tomorrow. And it solved a lot of the tech support issues. So we just said, take this media, take the system home, and go.
Okay,
And,
I have questions.
yeah, go.
Security.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, how are you dealing with content security? And also, what you're talking about, as far as I can see, is not remote editing.
Not yet. It will be, and it is. So Jeff can speak to this, which is HP RGS, Remote Graphics System.
But I want to hear how security. I mean, you've got.
Okay, let me put it this way. There are hospitals that have tried and true protocols for infection and all this. They're throwing that stuff out the window. Any port in a storm, they're saying, okay, screw that. We got people that are dying here. What do we need to do to get through this circumstance? Is this an ideal scenario for security? No, absolutely not. But are people, it's either that or you don't work. So we erred on the side of, we want our people to be able to still work. We trust them. We're employing them anyway. And we say, we trust you, so go do what you do, but do it at home. The studios are, this is a controversial topic, but they are absolutely crazy about security, and that paradigm has to change.
They were.
Really?
No, they still are. I think what we need to be really careful about during this time, though, is telling people that we're doing remote when we're not doing remote, and how we define remote. Because in this industry, we're trying really hard to make remote a thing. And we're trying really hard to develop really good tools. And oftentimes we've found this before. We develop great tools, and then we have to sell it to the people to use these things, because people don't like change. And the problem is that right now, we've got a lot of people coming up with amazing, really, really innovative solutions for the situation, but everyone's calling it remote. And in some cases, it's super high-end, Teradici level. Sometimes it's proprietary, like we have at Nice Shoes, and sometimes it's SneakerNet. And those things are not the same. And we can't be confusing a lot of our clients by saying that it's the same thing, because their experience will be very, very different.
But,
I think that's what Mark is arguing. But Katie, tell me what you're doing at your facility.
Let me interrupt for one moment, please.
Okay.
And that is, Katie, are you saying you would rather all your people not work?
Not at all. I'm just saying that it shouldn't be referred to as remote.
Yeah, there's a difference between business continuity and remote editorial. So taking systems out of edit bays and taking them home is business continuity. You've got the story still being told is happening. It's not necessarily fully collaborative. It's like semi-collaborative, because you're sending stuff around, you're having Zoom meetings, you're trying to screen share, you're trying to do all this stuff. So one of the things about the idea behind the RGS workflow is you keep everything there, and then you control that remotely. So you've got a business continuity solution that's going on with you going in. And part of the problem also people have run into, and kudos to Buna Murray for thinking ahead of the curve, because I was on a call with the folks from Ellen, post-production, last Friday, and we were talking about, well, how are these remote solutions? And I'm just kind of casually explaining the same pitch that I've been doing, and they said, well, and I said, well, can you get us a computer? And they said, well, we're locked out of the lot. Warner's shut down for anything other than fire and security as of Monday morning. So we got to do this now. And a lot of people have run into the situation where they're like, I really need to get remote editorial, or I need business continuity. Either way, I just can't get in the damn building because they've locked the doors. Because a lot of this runs on fear. So those are the differences between the concept of remote and the concept of business continuity. And there's other solutions out there. Our friends from Bebop have solutions where it's a lift and shift. Put it in the cloud and continue working that way on Premiere. Not going to work for an AvidWork group, but and the thing is, certain people are discovering certain core issues with what their business is. I mean, I'm in this room because GeekCode's an essential business. Federal, state, and county level, we're approved to continue working because we provide services for various different things other than television broadcast, which is also still covered in that. But the idea that we have to, continue business is the core. And then it's a question of what level of performance do you expect from those solutions. RGS is pretty decent. Most people have said, yeah, hey, it works. A lot of people have also said, well, I want my Mac. And the answer is, well, I'm sorry. We can find someone else who doesn't have to have a Mac, and we can continue working. The issue is our friends at Apple refuse to allow their OS to be virtualized. So the folks from Teradici, it's a great solution, but like was said, it's expensive. That's the issue also with a lot of the cloud editorial solutions. You pay for, with Bebop, you put your stuff up there. You have to pay your cloud provider, and you have to pay Bebop, and you bring your own license. So, and there's a few other folks like EditShare. They're doing the same sort of.
Let me step in a little bit here because we do have a few. You brought up a question. We do have a few questions coming in. One person did ask, "What about cloud tools for remote? What do you see that is interesting?" People, anybody?
There's a lot.
Or I would like to ask Mark, since he's just gone through this, why didn't you just go with like Avid Cloud or something? What happened?
We didn't have enough time.
Okay.
And we had 4 weeks of heads up. So we started doing this. We could not deploy what we needed to do fast enough to keep everybody safe and healthy and out of the building. So let's not confuse any port in a storm with an ideal solution. And our choice was to keep our people working and employed rather than perfect security or whatever. We can talk about.
Are you planning on moving? Are you planning on trying to move to a cloud solution now that this is going to go on for a while?
Depends on how you define a cloud solution. We have over 2 petabytes of spinning media internally on our servers.
That's expensive to lift and shift.
Yeah,
exactly. So the quick answer is more or less a on-prem solution that exports out to our team.
All right. Well, I haven't heard from Katie or Terry on how they're dealing, if they're doing remote work, and if so, how they're doing it. Katie, are you doing it at Nice Shoes?
Yeah. So Nice Shoes is fortunate in 2 ways. One, in this situation, one is that we don't have a huge editorial department, and that editorial department largely does short form commercial work. But we're also fortunate that all of our work is highly sensitive material. So, and we've also in the commercials world, which is very, very common to do remote grading, remote work. So it's actually quite common especially in the high end side of things, that, there'll be an agency in one part of the country or the world who wants to work with a very specific artist in another part of the world. And they're quite used to doing remote sessions. So we are one of the few companies that came up with a proprietary solution some years ago, because we were looking for ways to really have a really seamless solution for the high-end clients. Excuse me. So we were able to kind of stay up and running and working really easily. In terms of the DI department, we basically just sent our colorists home with the HDR X300s and checked their home studios for, to make sure that they're up to MPA guidelines for content security. but, you know, so essentially, you know, we are fortunate in that way. And I know that there's a lot of other companies who are having to be really quickly innovating, and are doing an amazing job. And I have to say right now, the engineers of this country and of this world right now really need big pats on the back for coming up with solutions that work for their companies at huge scale really, really fast, who didn't already have that stuff in place.
So are you planning on tweaking this solution in the future? Are you missing anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's already in the pipeline. We have to roll out later this year. Currently, we are UHD, but we're not HDR. So later this year, that's one of the things that's going to be added. And also Apple TV is going to be part of the solution moving forward. So that clients can essentially have an LG monitor and an Apple TV wherever they are and attend sessions from home. And that's something that we're planning on rolling out later this year. Unfortunately, not soon enough.
All right, Carrie, I think you're the only one we haven't spoken to about remote solutions. Is Alpha Dog Editorial closed? How are you handling work?
Well, that's a good question. Again, we're also technically an essential business in the broadcast media. I don't have any of the staff working. I said nobody has to come in who doesn't want to come in. I can go in and work on a system, but I'm the only one there, so I'm not really worried about that. And it's 3 miles from my house, so there's not any interaction with anyone else. As far as remote editing, for years and years and years, we were doing a show that our colorist was in Washington, and we were here in Burbank, and we would basically, it was, a version of SneakerNet. We would ship the drive up with all the media on it, a locked, secured drive. And then
go ahead and tell him, Terry, it was Project Runway.
I was under NDA, I couldn't say it. And then we would basically get each time he would finish an act, he'd just send the project file, which was nothing. And our editor would relink down here and continue on. We've also played around with the Resolve remote, but it really is kind of not, it doesn't really work well.
Not ready for time.
Yeah, and as far as these ideas that people say, oh, you can use ours for remoting, it's really hard to do when you're doing color correction, because you need the responsiveness at a really high resolution with really good color fidelity to actually do that. So
that's why we built our own.
I don't have, and you need a really fat pipe to get away with that too, on both sides.
There's a solution out there, Streambox. I was using that to get across the country, New York to LA, and then LA to London without a huge pipe. It would work with about 50 megabits, and HDR and 4K. So there are solutions out there. It's just a question of how much you need to spend for a particular solution to allow remote collaboration. Most of those were where you've got a DP that's off that needs to attend the session that's back in LA, and you don't want them to fly all the way back because that's 3 days of travel. So let's send them the HDR signal. They get an X300 monitor or a comparable.
And that's a big part. You've got to make sure that the monitoring on both ends is matching it perfectly in calibration, or the DP's telling you can just tweak that, and you keep tweaking it. It looks good on your end. He's not happy, et cetera, and creating a proper color room requires good lighting, the quality reference monitors, et cetera. If the client on the other end is sitting there on their laptop in a bright room judging your color correction, that's not going to really fly. So it's kind of hard. You'd have to have really a decent color correction bay on both sides,
or a decent viewing facility on the one side.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And and I think one of the things is also that we don't tend to do the remote. Typically, we won't do the remote color grading for features, but we'll definitely do it for commercials and for OTT clients. And the reason is because that, the way that we have recommended monitors for viewing, but that is the way that things will be viewed. And so actually the fact that we're streaming straight to, a high-end monitor that we do recommend, then it's actually not that terrible. I mean, it's not optimal. We like the DP to be in the room. Definitely the colorist has to have a proper room. But for the client's always looking at things on a client monitor anyway. So we essentially, suggest they have the equivalent of that. But for TV and commercials and OTT stuff, it's not that critical that the client is watching it a proper room on an X300.
So what about the editors that go home? What are you telling them about what they need? We did have one question about, what kind of drives they need and how many. We had another question about if there's a need to clean up household power for offsite editing, and a lot of these editors may have never done any of these things before. What are you telling people they have to do to work? Mark, you're raising your hand. Yes.
Sure. So we basically told everybody, take your system home, take it out of the bay, go home. So that answers what they need to work. Clean power, that's really specific to your own household. I can't address that, but usually it's not an issue. And I see one question, it's like, well, what's the future look like in terms of lag for editorial once
Yes,
production?
we are going to just touch on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's bleak.
Well, let's get to that for a second. I want to focus for now on the editor who's all of a sudden, or colorist or whoever it is, who's all of a sudden working at home.
Yeah.
Are any of them balking at that? Are they nervous about creating a home office? How have you dealt with it? Maybe somebody else?
I think they're happy to not be laid off, because if you look around the town, most people are laid off, and we have made an extraordinary effort to keep people on board. Any show that has, let's face it, all shows have ceased production, but we're fortunate that a couple of shows had a lot of material in the can already that they can continue post on, and those shows are continuing unchanged at this point. So, I can't speak to everybody's individual household system, but I think they're very happy to be given the option, the equipment, and the ability to continue working in this really difficult situation.
Katie, you're nodding your head. Let's hear from you.
Oh, Mark's absolutely right. I mean, at this point, what's really important for us as business owners and and people running these departments is to make sure that we can keep people in work. And that really is the biggest priority right now. So, Mark's absolutely right that, it's what we're doing right now for many different productions is not optimal, but what, in terms of the technology or the setup or the ease of use or the friction or anything like that. But as long as we acknowledge that, that's what matters to me, I think, in terms of, the client stuff. But what really is important right now is making sure that we can keep as many people in work as possible, however we can do that.
Right. So what about your people who go home? Do they take the monitors with them? What do they take with them? Everything, their whole setup?
Well, a lot of colorists have a studio at home because they're nerds.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So most of our colorists use Baseline, and some of our colorists use Resolve. We allow them to use whatever they're most comfortable with. The majority of them use Baseline. But with our system, all they needed to have at home was a panel and a monitor.
Right. So do you recommend any particular kind of monitors to them? This is one of the questions.
I see that's a question. Yeah. So it depends on the kind of work that you're doing. It is really important to have a color accurate monitor for any kind of color work. And that means definitely not using a laptop, for example. But it really does depend on the kind of work, and it really depends on the level of work that you're doing and how accurate it really needs to be. A lot of a basic guideline is often to look at it on the monitor that the end user is going to be seeing it on too. And so if, for example, it is only going to be seen on a laptop for some reason, which is, say, a web thing, then potentially you could do it on a laptop, although there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't. But that said, I think, really in terms of the monitoring, if you're doing, there are some really, really good consumer monitors out there that have really good color accuracy, do really nice HDR. And those ones are actually fine, as long as you're not doing the really high-end stuff. The blacks aren't really black. You don't really get the full range in the color spaces. But that said, that doesn't always matter, because at the end of the day, that's what the consumer might be watching it on. If you're doing a feature film, you've got to grade it in a theater, unfortunately, because you just need to have a projector, because that's how people will see it. So really, that's, I guess, my
Not
answer.
more.
Yeah, well, our colorists, like I say, went home with, X300s. We just, shipped them out to their apartments. But that's not something that everybody can do. And so really, again, in this situation, for now, in an emergency, we do the best that we can to keep everybody working. And I think everybody really understands that. But that said, we're not doing a lot of the high-end work right now. That stuff's shut down. So we're just doing what we can, and everybody understands that. That said, if we're out there promoting that our company does remote as standard, then we have to be really doing it properly. And that's the big difference, I think.
Yes. Anybody else have anything to comment about this, Jeff or
Sure.
Terry or Mark?
One of the core things is about who's got the, where the deliverables going. So if you're delivering to Netflix, you have to have a Dolby certified monitor. A lot of places will tell you exactly what sort of specs you've got to hit, and then you can go do that. A lot of the smaller, if it's just a simple OTT that's not that big of a deal, they may not have specs, and then it's okay, you're getting as good as you can. One person mentioned the Apple monitor. Here's the odd thing: the Apple monitor, the specs on it outperform an X310, so at 1/4 the price, even with the stand.
Yeah, but Dolby was not happy with it on the first pass. They didn't certify it, so.
Not on the first pass, but the thing is, it's pretty damn close. It's a wide color gamut monitor that does, it's a 32 inch that does 4K. Ridiculously priced compared to what everybody else has been using. So, definitely close enough for radio. It's not close enough for Netflix, because if it's not, approved by our friends at Dolby, then it's not covered there. But that gets into the whole HDR panel mess where Sony cornered the market because they had to do something after getting rid of the X300s. So there's a bunch of other monitors that are out there with the same X310 or the 310 designation. I see you've got company.
Hey, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Nice. So there's a lot of monitors out there that are the 310 designation that are made with some of the same panels, just slightly different technology in how they implement. But the price varies. It starts around 25K and goes up into the 40s. So that's the other thing. I love the idea of, hey, let's send an X300 home with people. I used to tell people you're not taking an X300 in your car because your insurance won't cover it if the monitor gets damaged in an accident. Because how are you going to explain to an insurance company that the monitor that needs to be replaced was 3 times the value of your car?
Good point.
One of the questions was actually also how we each finishing shows for color if no one's in the office.
Yes.
And again, I think that's something that the difference between how I answer that and how Mark answers that is going to give the kind of gamut of how those things are being done.
Perfect.
So how we're doing that is largely that we can essentially, so our colorists, they remote into the server that is in our office. So there's nothing local, and it's all so we never ever let them have material that's local at home, because it's really important for us for content security. So they essentially remote into the server at Nice Shoes in New York, and then they stream back out to the client. So that's how that works. And the client can be at home, in another facility, wherever, or right now at home, hopefully. But essentially that's how that's working. So it's sort of a two-way stream that streams into the colorist system and then back out again to the client.
All right, Mark.
I could speak to how we're doing it. And I just want to say that this obsession with security is gonna change real quick as a result of this situation. But in our case, we want you to watch our show. So if it gets pirated, hey, so be it. A lot of our shows started with sex tapes. What can I tell you? So,
Mark.
Yeah, to differentiate the difference, yes, the original media is gone home with our colorists who we trust. They do their work. and it gets either uploaded from their house. One of the things, by the way, we're finding that, you know, nobody at home has the bandwidth. They're not paying for expensive upload capability.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we, as you know, Buena Murray, we just woke up this week to the fact that we need to compensate people for the bandwidth that they're using at home. So the difference between what, you know, listen, I don't want to pay for extra bandwidth that I'm not using. So we have decided that if, you know, we're asking you to work at home, we're going to compensate you for the extra bandwidth that it requires to upload that finished file to our network partners. So we're doing that.
I'm curious, do you have the problem of colorists that might live in areas where they can't get the bandwidth they need, where their, you know, their choices are very limited?
Right now, most everybody is in the Los Angeles area, so no.
Okay.
We don't have people working outside of this area, so it's really not an issue.
Okay.
But you know, the difference between what we're talking about, what Katie's talking about, is number one, our security concerns are less, and our, you know, we're operating this more as a triage situation than a long-term solution. This is any port in a storm, keep us going until we figure out a better way. And I want to make clear that distinction, that this is not a sustainable business model. This is to get us through a crisis.
You know, on the security issue, I find it kind of funny that, you know, people are concerned about not having the media on the other end. Well, the reality is, if an editor or a colorist or whatever is sitting in their home studio doing the color, they could be recording it with a camera off the screen or doing a screen capture. And guess what? Doesn't matter where the media is, they're recording the finished show, just like the people who used to steal the movies out of the theaters.
Yeah, they do that. They get fired and they never work again, and neither does your company.
Yeah, but it would be the same thing if they got the media stolen at their house. They'd get fired and they'd never work again. And you see what I'm saying? Is like, to me, I don't understand why it's considered more secure to, you don't trust the colorist to have the media at his house, but you trust him to have the media streaming to his house. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I realize you're dealing with studios, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not about trusting the colorist though. It's actually about the pipe essentially, and it's about people hacking your computers. That's really where it is. It's about how many copies of the media are there and where are they, and
Chain of custody.
Yeah, exactly. So if the only copies of the media are actually in a really secure server, that's the kind of level of security that nobody in their home can have, then, you know, it's a lot more secure than you're really going to have if you are actually having copies of that media willy-nilly all over the place. You know, it doesn't matter how much you trust your colorist. It's not about that. We do trust our colorists. If we didn't trust them, we wouldn't hire them.
Right.
The thing is also at that point, if you're using like a Teradici or an RGS workflow, it's a pixel differential that's coming down the line. You can't grab into the stream and get anything of any value. You can take
put
pictures.
Your iPhone up and record it.
Oh yeah, you can definitely do that. And that I mean, I remember waking up one morning and part of season 6 of Game of Thrones had leaked. I was in charge of that material. And I was like, oh, holy crap. And then I found out, oh, it's some critic had a screener and his kid took a picture.
Oh,
and it's as simply as how it worked.
Wow. Yeah.
So the other thing also is I was on a webinar, it was actually a Zoom webinar, from Bebop. They're doing the daily things, and they had the gentleman on from TPN. And basically they were talking about how they could start doing assessments of people's houses. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have the money for that. The assessments aren't paid for by the studio any longer. And also, nobody ever has a certified facility. There is no certification any longer. The MPA doesn't certify it, hands it over to the TPN, and they look at it and say, oh, here's what's going on. Warner Brothers, are you cool with that? Sony, are you cool with that? Disney, are you cool with that? And if the answer is no, then they're not going to do the work at that facility, whether it's
So Jeff, it sounds like, are you supporting Mark's idea that the studio's strict ideas of security are going to get looser?
Right now they are. I mean, and the thing is, what's funny is, originally when we were talking about doing this, I thought that would be one of the things we talk about. came up at the HPA, this concept, it's a long-running concept of zero trust infrastructure. Basically, you just come to the conclusion that the people who want to steal your stuff are in your stuff already. So you have to encrypt your stuff so that if they get it, it's worthless. And that's kind of the idea that probably we're going to have to go to where it doesn't matter what the facility is. You can post anywhere because as long as the media is encrypted in transit and at rest, no one can get to it other than taking pictures of the screen.
And how
That's
close are
really
we to that? Katie, yes?
Sorry, I was just saying that is really important, that side of it. I think, those of us who've been in situations where we've worked on extremely high profile things that have somehow gotten leaked. I mean, we know how much we crapped in our pants worldwide when that happened, hoping it wasn't coming from anywhere near us. But, and these things do happen. And so there are a few of us in this business who are still really take this content security thing really seriously. I think we really saw actually I think it was last year when the Avid, when the Avid malware thing was going on, that it really caught a good 90% of the world's editors with their pants down in terms of their actual content security that they were claiming to have, but they were all connected to the internet, which is, the number one, do not ever connect a production machine to the internet. And they're all saying, oh yeah, we're totally cool with content security, yet suddenly their Avid is down. Well, I guess you're not.
Well, that's the number one problem usually is operator error, right?
It's not operator error. This is about liability. If you go and you have an audit and you tell, and everybody says, well, hey, they're good, this is what they're doing, and then they turn around and do something completely different the next day because you're not there, guess what? The content owners are now clear. It's now the liability of the place that's lied about their level of security to, make up for, monetary losses.
Operator error, I mean that you have people are usually the security link. And if those people happen to be your employees, that's an issue.
Yeah, but this is about, you talked liability. I'm talking everybody wants to blame somebody else for the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Breaks happen, breaches happen. That's the world that we live in. And all this is about is who can we blame for this?
Right.
It's not my problem, it's your problem. That's all that it's about. And that's nuts.
Yeah.
By the way, we're getting a lot of questions in, and I want to say to everybody listening that we will have a time for, I'm not going to answer all your questions or have all your questions answered right away, but we will have a Q&A time, in which case I will go through every question that we haven't answered thus far. But we did get one question saying regarding to security, film versus TV production. Anybody want to comment on that?
I guess that's my wheelhouse again. Since we do both, I've done both. So again, it actually depends more on the budget of the production. The budget of the production tends to determine how much security they need, more than anything else. So now that there are TV shows that have the kind of budgets of massive feature films, they also have the same amount of security needs. And a lot of that just has to do with it's the value of the product and how much it will cost if it's leaked. So essentially, if Star Wars gets leaked ahead of time, that is a huge problem because people really invest a lot in the surprise of going to see Star Wars and not knowing what's going to happen. Same with Game of Thrones and things like that. And so really those extremely high budget productions, whether they're film or television or games or whatever else, and or commercials, at a really, really high budget level, that's where you really need to have the higher level of security because the asset that you're protecting from being stolen has greater value. And like Mark was saying, there are some of his shows that he wants people to leak. He wants people to see because he wants people to get hyped about it, and that there's a lot of good publicity in leaking things from a show like that. And so really it's not, and that's where there are certainly some productions and shows where, the solutions that we have today for the situation that we're in, it's less critical. It's like, the fact that we all have to be cognizant of the fact that in our homes, things that we talk about get heard. We just know that because, I will talk about how I need a new pair of socks and suddenly my Facebook feed is full of socks.
Right.
And so, you know, it's really important to be aware of that sort of thing, because that's the level of value. Because if I talk about something really boring, I don't get that coming up in my Facebook feed. And so you have to be aware of the fact that, especially when you're working in your home, that if you have content around you on your devices that is clearly of high value and is going to hit some sort of tags for people looking and fishing for that kind of content to leak, to sell, to make money off, then you have to have greater security wherever it is that you're working. Because if somebody's talking about 6 o'clock news, I don't think there's too many people going to be worried about that.
So Katie, I respect what you're saying regarding large budget features, but I think the main point of the conversation here is, how is editorial going to change moving forward? So this isn't really about the do we need security or do we not, but how can we enable a remote editorial workflow? How can we break free of the strict NDA requirements that are based on yesterday's assumptions of security and not acknowledging today where people can't be in the building?
Well,
So that's what
one of the insight that I can offer from some of the high tech side of things is that a lot of people might have heard of the term studio in the cloud. It's a term that's been bandied around for the last 5 or 6 years. And it's the concept that basically every major studio and a lot of facilities as well have been trying to develop. And it's essentially a lot of what we're talking about now with our remote workflows. So it's the concept of essentially the studio or the content owner of some sort having all the media in one place. Say it's Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers gets all the media from the shoot. They essentially hold it, and then facilities can remote in and use it, but it's all secure and it's all owned by the content owner. That idea of the studio in the cloud is something that's been bandied around for a really long time. And the reason why it hasn't really ever taken off to a great level, Netflix has done a really good job actually of getting a little bit closer to it in terms of implementing it in the real world. But the main reason why the studios haven't actually got to a point where they can implement what they're developing is because of content security requirements. And there's been a lot of ideas put around.
But you say requirements.
Right. And so what I'm saying is that I believe
that's what's going to change.
Right. I think that's going to change now because of the fact that we've had to implement that technology before it's ready. Essentially, we've had to hack it together, and everyone's gone, "What? Wait, it was okay then, so maybe it's okay now." When this all goes away.
One of the pieces here we've got is there is security through obscurity. I mean, I don't know who any of your editors are, Mark. I couldn't go to their house and get your media.
See that guy right next to you, Terry Curran?
I'll look him up. No, but I mean, the thing is also, it's going to be, people talking about, talking on social media where they work and what they do, and then, oh, well, I know where their house is, and oh, look, their address is 1673. I'll try that as their Wi-Fi password. So the difficulty is going to be that to go forward into a
wait. How did you know my Wi-Fi password?
I can't say. Plead the fifth. The difficulty we're going to be getting into is because there is going to be media possibly everywhere. We have to A, have that encryption, and B, have something inside of it that's invisible watermarking so that you know where the leak came from. If a picture of something comes out, if a video of something comes out, they can go in and say, oh, look, that was Jeff's media, and we know exactly where that came from, and we can work to adjust the situation for everybody.
That's where blockchain smart contracts will come in, I think.
And that's also one of these, the whole thing about the idea of blockchain coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
Where, okay,
Yeah, as Katie was saying, yes.
Yeah.
Are you considering a key code using blockchain?
Well, we're not actually the folks that normally would be working with folks to secure their stuff. So we give you the stuff to put it on, and we can talk to you about best ways to do it, but we're not actually going in and implementing those things, because that's actually very bleeding edge at the moment. And,
It is.
People will be moving there, but it's more systemic in the way that you need to get there. That I mean, you have to begin with security as your mindset at the beginning. So on set, I mean, and you know, film production and television production is nomadic. We show up, we throw up our tents, we shoot some stuff, we upload it somewhere or we send it somewhere, and then we go off to the next thing. Nobody's coming by to say, well, are you doing this securely?
Yeah.
No. I mean,
Yeah,
a couple of years ago at the HPA, they were saying the weakest link in a film production chain is the Wi-Fi on set.
Yes, that is, and that's still the case. That's still happening. There was
All you need to
another
do
the guy at HBA did that again this year, and he talked about the exact same thing. And he
You
was
walk
even
in and
showing it in their
written there.
presentation.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Interesting.
but I'm curious with all the remote stuff, and we're talking about, you know, well, I mean, I noticed nobody's really talking about using the cloud for editing.
Well, yes, and I
But-
do. Yes.
But I'm curious because what's happened now is all these people, everybody's at home. Everybody's at home watching TV or trying to work from home. And then you throw people who require higher bandwidth, like those of us who are editing, et cetera, and you get this. This is what you see now. All of a sudden, YouTube and Netflix and Amazon have to drop their quality because guess what? The internet as it exists now is overloaded. And we're talking about continuing to add more and more remote
See,
editing.
the thing is, and that's also why we're talking more about remote workflows and some of this, as opposed to trying to stream, you know, heavy content down the pipe. I'm not getting 4K into my house, and I
Well-
got a pretty decent internet connection. However, 20 megabits to control an RGS unit, I can do that. That's not a problem. I can probably control 3 or 4 out of my house. Getting that piece there is, I mean, that's the piece that gives us control. The other difficulty we're going to have with cloud editorial is we're creating a crap ton of content. Do we actually have the bandwidth to get it up there? Not individualized, but as a glut. How much material are we going to make over the next 3 years, and exactly what kind of bandwidth is necessary to get it into the cloud?
We're using
No.
high efficiency encoding. We're using HEVC codecs for that.
We do, but at the same time, there's still a ton of video. I mean, we've got cars that are collecting video because they're trying to figure out autonomous driving. So there's all this crap that's out there. So I mean, the one thing the cloud providers are doing is they're starting to move the cloud closer to us because they've realized they can't pick up our workload and move it off. But you know, they can move a Wi-Fi. You know, you can embed. You know, AWS is doing this. They're embedding their processing and their compute power inside of Verizon's city aggregation sites. So you've got cloud processing there. It's single millisecond latency. So if they start adding in storage there, that that's an interesting proposition. But getting their compute power close to our storage capacity is one thing that needs to be done. And you know, the other thing, I've said for a number of years is, as we start trying to move into this cloud thing, I mean, the company to invest in would probably be SohoNet, because you know, the people who are controlling that last mile to facilities currently are the ones who are getting the throughput. They're getting the throughput in terms of dollars.
Right.
But it's really hard to get pricing on this stuff. This is, you know, especially in the last week, all these people are talking about this is how I move files, this is, et cetera, and you go, what is the pricing? When you try to ask Bebop, what is this really going to cost me as I'm sitting here cutting a show and working on stuff? You know, they dance around. It's really hard to get a solid, you know, I know exactly what an Avid license costs. I have no idea what it's going to cost
but
to
also
work
here's
on the
the other
cloud.
thing, Gary. There's a cost to Bebop and there's a cost to the cloud provider. So those are two different things. So it depends on how much you've got, how long you're going to be working, and how much the particular cloud provider is going to charge you. They're two different billing pieces.
I understand. And we work in a world of fixed budgets. You know, the client comes to us and they go, this is my budget. I can't go work on a variable. I have no idea.
If you have to ask, you can't afford it.
Cheers.
Okay.
Nice.
Katie, you look like you had something to say about the cost of going to the cloud.
Oh,
No.
really? I was just
Okay.
agreeing.
You're just agreeing. Okay. Well, all right. Are we discussing remote editing as something that is here to stay? Is this here just for the duration of the coronavirus? Are we going to go back to business as usual? Or are we going to move into more remote editing and coloring? Mark?
Yeah, I think it's here to stay. I think we are living through the moment where it was before Corona and after Corona. And what this event has proven to many people, and specifically the people holding the purse strings, is that a remote editing scenario is possible and it works and we can do it. So it's not, yes, we're talking about technology here, but the bigger issue is the human interaction and the feeling that, oh, if you're remote, we can't, that has evaporated. And I can tell you over the last 2 weeks that, we've been pretty successful at staying on course, staying on schedule, staying on target with what we've been doing before we left the building. So yes, this is going to be a model that's going to move forward. I personally think people are going to want to come in on a once a week, once every, a interim basis, but they're not going to want to come in every day, 9 to 5.
So 2 things, Mark. What's the benefit to Bunim/Murray with going to remote production? And secondly, does that mean you're going to graduate out of SneakerNet to some other, more high-tech solution?
So 2 things. The benefit right now to us is nothing. It's
I understand.
It's
health,
staying
yeah.
in business.
I understand. Going forward, what's the benefit?
And going forward, that's open for debate. I think it's a benefit to our talent pool to say, we're going to allow you to work at home 3, 4, 5 days a week. Come in when it's important. If I'm competing against somebody else, a different production company, and I can offer that option, and you as an editor, who do you think you're going to want to work for? You're going to want to work for the place that gives you the most options and allows you to have a work-life balance that you might. I personally live about an hour away from the office. I'm actually enjoying this time because I've driven 2 miles in the last 2 weeks. And one of those was.
If you continue with remote editing, what comes after SneakerNet? That was my second question.
Sure, like solutions like HP RGS, solutions like Teradici, and maybe SneakerNet is the right option. If you're coming in, let's say once a week, you can do a lot with SneakerNet. And then also, we haven't really talked about VPN, which is basically a way to remotely control another computer.
Right.
No. VPN is the way to securely connect into another network.
Right.
VPN is not a control protocol.
Right. It's not an edit. It's not, you can't watch stuff, but you can trigger events. You can say, make a transcode, make a copy, do this. It's really helpful in this scenario where you might not be in the office. So SneakerNet, VPN, RGS, Teradici, there's 4 separate things. And we also have, like Sony C, remote review and approval, stuff like that. These are all tools that we've always sort of had before, but it's going to be a much different world moving forward.
So you'd adopt Teradici if the price went down? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, of course, I hope the price goes down because it's really expensive right now.
But it's also not a Mac.
Pardon me?
You can't do it on a Mac.
Exactly. And that, that brings up another whole topic. I create, if anybody is familiar with the Creative Cow, www.creativecow.com, I posted a link called Cupertino, We Got a Problem. And that is, most people in the creative post community love their Macs, myself included. I've been on a Mac from 1992. What we're talking about is really difficult to do with a Mac. Not impossible, thank you, Jeff, but really difficult. And I think this is going to push a lot of people off of Macs onto PCs.
Everybody else, can you chime in? Is remote work going to be something that you're going to do?
So I always come down to the business questions of it. Things like if I'm a production company and you tell me, hey, you don't have to pay for real estate anymore, the editors are going to eat it, then obviously that's the way I'm going to go. That's a great thing. They can stay at home and they're paying for the real estate because they're working in their houses and it's not my problem. I can see that after this, a lot of production companies might just say, ooh, that worked out really well. Let's just keep going that way. And on the other side of it, as a creative person, I look at it and go, I gained from those water cooler talks with other editors
Yeah.
that I will no longer have, you know, and and then the distractions that you have at a house, it's really hard. You have to have an entirely different level of, you know, personal discipline to force yourself to keep working when there's all the distractions around your home. Whereas if you're at work, and it's not just our industry. I mean, we're probably better at it because we're used to going into our edit bay and sitting in there and working all day. We're used to that. But my wife, who's now working at home, who works in an office, says she can't wait to go back to work because there's just too many distractions and it's really hard to work at home.
Yeah, as
Stop
an
bothering
editor,
her, Terry.
as a
Well,
journalist who works at home, I can agree it's not for everyone.
And
Sometimes people think it's a dream and they start it, and within a couple of weeks they want out.
And the thing is, content creation is inherently a collaborative process. It always has been. And I think any of this technology that's going to serve furthering the collaborative process, like being able to, okay, I've got a color session that I'm doing from my home and able to share it with the client, and they're on, you know, a chat window over here. They're seeing the exact same thing I've got. That makes sense. That's the technology that will be brought forward into this. The other pieces of it, where we're just simply trying to, you know, keep the business going and doing, you know, anything hell and high water, I don't think that'll continue. I mean, I saw that there was an email thread on one of the Facebook things about somebody asking, well, what should I charge for kit if I'm working out of my house? And, you know, someone I know said, basically was like, screw you, dude. You still have a job. So, you know, and then in the choice between people being able to, you know, if there was a point at which we were saying that, okay, editors, it's a buyer's market for editors, then yeah, they could be saying, well, hey, I get to have that work-life balance thing and I can work from home if I want to. Then yeah, that works. But I don't think we're in that point yet. I think it's still a buyer's market for the content creators and the people who, you know, want to get the job done. And, you know, they want to make sure that their people are at Lantana and they're working and that the editors are bringing it in and getting it done and getting the deliverables done. They don't have to go wandering around to figure out who's doing what. No calls needed.
Katie, I know that you deal a lot with the business side. So tell me a little bit about the future of remote work at your facility and how you see the business model changing.
I think what's really important about the business model in general is that in terms of the rules of future adoption, it's one of my wheelhouses, right? The rules of future adoption, predicting whether or not something is actually going to be taken into the mainstream. And I think that there are a bunch of different rules that you can kind of measure something on. The one that I like to use is a simple ABC, that something has to improve from what was there previously. It has to be more accessible, it has to be better, and it has to be better at collaboration. So any kind of thing, we're talking about collaboration now because that's what we do for a living, but if you look at any kind of technology and you look at why certain ones succeeded and certain ones fail, they have to be communal or collaborative, they have to be better, and they have to be accessible. So if we look at the aspects of the remote kind of solutions that we have going on right now, you know, I think that's where we can break it down and we can really look at not all of the solutions and all of the ways that we're implementing them will probably continue. Because like Terry said, you know, a lot of what we do is very collaborative, it's very creative, and you have to be in the room. But if you look at aspects of what we're doing and you see which ones are highly accessible, so really just easy to implement, anyone can do it, it doesn't need, you know, you don't have to have a special Teradici to do it, for example. What is better than a current solution? What are we doing now that we're like, holy shit, that's so much better, I don't have to drive to a session or whatever else, right? So where people are finding something better and also where people are successfully being communal and collaborating. So I think if we break down every little piece of what we're doing now, the pieces that will stick and change change what we're doing forever are the ones where the ABCs apply.
All right. Thoughts, people? Responses? Yes, Mark?
Follow up on what Katie is saying. I have what I call the 10X rule. Any change that you make has to be 10 times better than the status quo, because you're never going to get 10 times. You're lucky if you might get 3, 4, 5. So you have to reach for 10 and you might get 3, 4, 5. And everything that we're talking about here, you know, there's some, it's yes, no, whatever, but net, I think it's a plus to add this to our toolkit. I'm not saying we have to do it all the time, but to have it as an option, my God, why wouldn't we do that?
Well,
It's certainly an option that our clients have really enjoyed. You know, saying to them that they can have any of our colorists. They don't even have to be there. They can use, they can take advantage of tax credits in Toronto or Massachusetts or New York, even if they're in LA. Things like that do have that. They are better in that way, right? And so, there certainly are things that now the holdout clients that were a little bit skeptical about that before, they have to do it now, and they're like, oh, cool. So, there's definitely going to be places where people are going to really love it. I think the one thing that I would be just really, really say we have to be careful of, and we've seen it in other technologies, is just hyping up what we're doing too much. And I'm just really, really concerned that there are a few companies kind of hyping up their solutions as like, this is amazing remote, it's so great and collaborative and it's real time and it's awesome. And then people actually click on it and do it and they go, oh, it's actually a bit shit, I'd rather go back to the web.
Yes, exactly.
And then when we're sitting there trying to say, no, we really want you to get on board with this part of remote, like if you're going to do your final color review or your final, review of your fine cut, you can actually do that from home. You don't have to come into the office, which is great. And we want people to do that. We don't want them to go, oh, remember when I did that remote thing back during the COVID-19? I mean, God, that really sucked. And so, we've got to be really careful about how we talk about it. And, that's what I keep harping on about that. But I think it's really important of how we present it to people, that we don't overhype it in the same way as, people had automated scripts and we're calling it AI, and when people actually looked at it and went, that's not AI, that's kind of.
I don't think it's actually hype at this point, because the thing is, we've got people who are being thrust into this. And going back to what Mark was saying about the 10 times rule, I mean, the bottom line is any kind of change needs to be worth the pain to do it. Now, the thing is, the pain to do this change, it's happening right now, and it's inflicted by an external force. It's not because, oh, we'd like to do this and we're going to go forward. So we're going to end up with a bunch of technology that we've all tested out, and we're going to be like, well, that's a bunch of shit. And this was okay, but I wouldn't really want to do this full time. And this thing worked out really well. It's all going to fall out. We're going to find out what we know. And the one thing I have discovered is loose microphones and me gesticulating don't work out together.
So Tara, you seem to be
5 years of innovation. So we've definitely hit 5 years of innovation development in like 2 weeks. And that's really
Absolutely.
Yeah, necessity is a mother.
right.
Yeah, this is to editing what the title of the tsunami was to videotape.
And
Yes.
the thing is, if you watch the videos of the tsunami coming in, you see like these cars, it's this neighborhood, this car turns around because there's water coming, and it's slowly coming, and suddenly you're like, holy shit, it's taken the building away. It just suddenly, it's just wham, it's there. And that's literally what's been happening with this. People have been, they've been like, well, we need to figure out something. We should probably figure out something. Oh crap, we're too late.
Yeah.
And that's the piece I keep running into with folks where, well, the building's locked, the lot's locked. We can't do this. The city won't let us.
And yet it seems that it's a mixed bag, that nobody can say with any assurance that the model is going to change when everything's back to quote unquote normal, which who knows when that will be, that things are not going to just go back to the way they were.
I can say that.
Because-
Absolutely, positively, the genie is out of the bottle.
Okay. All right.
We are not going back. Too many people have had a taste of what this could be, and they like it.
Okay.
And executives and people controlling the purse strings have gone, oh, that wasn't so bad.
But
Hey,
the amount of money you're paying for people's extra bandwidth isn't going to stay low. A lot of people have been coming along and saying, well, we'll give you free licenses. We won't put your bandwidth cap in. That's going to take hold. AT&T and Spectrum and all these other internet service providers, they want their pound of flesh. It's also why 5G is going to be slow to roll out, because Verizon wants their pound of flesh.
I would
And-
argue that they see an opportunity and they're going to step on the accelerator and get it done sooner.
Well, if my cable cost goes down, I'm all for that.
Well, I have two other facility people here, Nice Shoes and Alpha Dog Editorial. Are you planning on, is the remote work going to continue past the coronavirus?
Maybe.
I mean, we've had remote work was a big part of what we were doing before. It's a big part of what we're doing now. It will continue to be a big part of what we're doing. So I think we're a little bit unique in that sense. The only thing is that we'll probably expand it because we, as I said before, we had holdout clients that weren't totally sold on it. And I think now that they've had to have a taste, I think that we'll have more clients choosing to do remote sessions that wouldn't have before. For example, clients that are in the same city as the colorist might just go, you know what, it's cool, I don't need to come in.
Right. Okay. And Terry, what about you?
If you'd asked me 3 days ago, I'd have said, nah, we're closing the doors. But now with the bill they passed today, I don't know. That might, they're throwing a lifeline out for people. But when you're a small business in California, like we are, and basically all of your clients are told to stop working, that means you don't get work. And that means there's no revenue coming in. And because we're primarily a finishing house, it's going to be whenever they do start production again, like if a month and a half from now they go, okay, you guys can start doing stuff, it's going to be several weeks before productions can actually get back to going. And then after they shoot for however long, it's 6 to 8 weeks minimum. I mean, the best case scenario before they get through the offline part, before they come to us. And then you got another 2 months to wait for the studio to pay. So we're talking about revenue not coming in for us for 4 to 6 to 8 months from this point.
Well,
so I don't know.
That is a big issue. And I know that people in visual effects and post are still working on stuff that's already been shot. But now that all the productions are closed down, are all the productions, Mark, closed down at your facility at Buena Murray?
Absolutely.
When does the work run out?
Soon. I mean, months. We're fortunate that when this hit, we were at low tide with a couple of our shows already wrapped production and about a quarter of the way through post. So those will continue for a couple of months. I don't think anybody can predict when things will start up again. We could assume, maybe in May or maybe in June, but we don't know. We don't know what the future is going to bring.
Right.
So that's going to put a lot of facilities in hot water if all of a sudden there's no work for post facilities.
It's really dangerous for the middle class of post houses.
Yes. Does anybody have a plan B? Or plan A,
Would you like fries with that?
Early retirement?
I know that the small business loans are.
I think diversifying is a big part of it. I think a bunch of us who were very stuck in we do this one thing are now very quickly going, we'll do whatever we can. I think that's a big part of it. And I think everybody right now has already started looking in that direction. In terms of tiding ourselves over while a lot of our clients are having to ramp back up. We're looking at, alternative work and alternative ways of working. It is really it's really tough for everybody in the business. And I think those of us who have jobs still, and those of us working to make sure that our staff do have jobs, I think are really fortunate because so many people are really struggling right now.
Well, pretty much everybody in production is out of work. And I think it's just kind of fortunate that some VFX and post people are still working. And
One thing though is that a lot of the productions, in fact, some of the productions that were sort of in that we were talking to before all of this happened, a lot of the shoots are going abroad or out of state or wherever else. And I think what's probably going to happen first is that while the US and specific states might open up, there may be some restrictions on international and interstate travel. And so certainly there will be probably a little bit more of the productions deciding to, shoot locally that would have shot abroad, for example. So that'll potentially keep a lot more work in the US or in California, if you're in, if they're in California, in New York, if they're in New York. And that in turn can actually bring a little bit more work to post because you've certainly got to make, you've got to make things look like the place that they were supposed to be. And that's what we do.
Right.
I mean, one of the other problems was before this started, production was at capacity in Los Angeles. There wasn't studio space available. So, I mean, I think sections of this, it's going to be a notch, just a notch dropped off, and we're going to go straight right up the cliff and pick up. Other parts are going to be like, well, yeah, that wasn't necessarily that good of an idea. Plus, at the moment, we got a lot of people consuming content.
Yes.
But also at the same time, there's not ad revenue. So it's like after, 2008, after the presidential election was over, we were in the financial crisis, and all of a sudden there's no ad revenue coming in from presidential campaigns. We're seeing PSAs at, during the morning news shows on the major networks. So, there's going to be a reckoning as to, who's going to be left and who was running efficiently beforehand.
Well, I know that advertising and media, I've been writing a lot about this, is advertising in the media sector is the first sector to get hit hard when advertisers tighten their belts.
Well,
So-
what's interesting, what came out today is that even though Twitter is through the roof right now with
Yes.
users and subscribers, their ad dollars are way down. It's across social media. The ad dollars are way down because the businesses are going, we're in trouble. We can't
But
afford.
that's also true for local stations,
Yeah.
newspapers, magazines, all media.
One of the first things you cut, your advertising dollars.
Yep,
That's
Katie?
it. In terms of, we do a lot of commercials at night shows. That's what we're known for.
Mhm.
And a lot of our clients, in terms of the ads that had been made now have to be remade because the world has changed very suddenly. It's like after 9/11, there was actually a lot of ads being made, remade, and every brand needs to has to have a new message. So I think in the short term, that when I talk about diversifying and moving into other markets, I'm not saying all of y'all should step on my toes, but right now that is where the work is. So for a lot of the freelancers who are editors and mixers and production people, that is actually what's having to happen right now. And we're having to find ways of working without doing actual normal kinds of productions. But that is something, and that's what we have creative executives for. They get their high salaries and they have to come up with this kind of stuff. And now they're really being tested. So that's really, that is actually somewhere where there is a lot of work right now.
Right.
We
Okay.
have a similar situation. Reality allegedly reflects what's really happening. And things that were shot prior to this event, they're not going to resonate with the audience afterwards. And there's, it's almost pointless to keep editing a story that is going to be off point 2 months from now. When we come back into production, everyone's going to want to know. It's like after 9/11. I mean, it was a lot different. The manner, the tone, everything, the attitude was a lot different. So a lot of what we're doing now is going to be characterized as pre-corona. And then once we start, we have to change our sort of focus.
Right. Okay. Jeff, did you have something to say here? Oh, he seems to have.
There we go. That's going to end up with a lot of reshoots.
Okay.
So people, if something's tone deaf, they're going to have to go and reshoot that. So it's a little more difficult in reality. But with other things that are scripted, I remember 24 was one of the shows I was working on, and the pilot was about to come out, and then 9/11 hit. The pilot of 24 had an exploding plane in it, and people jumping out of it. That never saw the light of day because that was been completely tone deaf. So you got to go back and redo this. So that's also where we could end up with some of this hockey stick, where it's going to jump right back up, and it's like, oh crap, we got to redo this. We got to get entertainment stuff back out there, because regardless, at the end of the day, we're still going to have. There's still a certain amount of air that people need to fill, and there's a certain amount of OTT that streamers want to provide. So there's still going to be. We're still going to be in the golden age of content, and we're going to have to reshoot a good chunk of it that happened over the last couple months.
Well, just in the next month, we're getting new streamers with NBC's Peacock, HBO Max, and Quibi, of course. Quibi, which I think is delayed its opening by a month, perhaps.
We've only delayed it a Quibi.
Yeah.
Oh God.
A lot of the studios are right now acknowledging as well that they are aware that when everything comes back, because we had we had our annual schedule of all of the things that were going through production and post, and they were nice and smooth. We had some ups and downs. But right now we've got the stuff that's delaying, and suddenly it's coming up against all the stuff that was already scheduled for whenever that's going to be. And so most of the studios are now very aware that what's going to happen with that, there's going to be a lot of competition. People are going to really struggle to get crew, post, facilities, vendors, and it's just a known fact, essentially, that everyone's going to raise their rates. So it's just something to be aware of for those out there who are kind of worrying right now about the fact that they're obviously not working right now. It is pretty understood that the budgets are going to have to go up because people are going to raise their rates.
Because they have options. They're going to have 3, 4, 5 offers for the same, yeah, of course.
So I'm hearing that from a lot of the, the producers out there. They're saying, look, we know that it's going to cost us more the longer this is delayed in the cost of the vendors, the freelancers, and everybody else.
Well, somebody commented,
Mark's not going to want to hear this, but does that mean you think editors' rates are going to go up?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Cool.
Somebody has commented, let me insert here. We have a comment here that advice for editors: don't wait for work, go buy an edit system and just cut stuff. This year's whiners are next year's roofers.
Sounds like Chris Beauvais.
Yeah, it is.
How'd you guess?
The thing is, bring up your skills. I mean, one of the things that actually is odd about KeyCode is we got that whole education thing. ETP is free now if you're working for a company. So they're taking off on classes, and people are registering for them because they want to learn how to do stuff. I mean, we got Resolve classes that are going off, MC 101s, the Avid classes. People are like, okay, we're going to sharpen the saw, and while we're waiting for this to thaw out.
All right, what about, I know that none of us are going to go to NAB and see all those interesting new tools at the edges of the show, but what has been going on with new technologies? And Katie, this might be a good place to talk a little bit about blockchain and how it might fit in the post facility. Anybody else who might want to talk about machine learning, artificial intelligence, whatever new technologies are invading our space?
So in terms of machine learning and AI, that was pretty last year. That stuff's kind of in now and embedded and we won't even notice it. I think that the next thing, which isn't quite here yet, is, and someone had asked the question about how could we explain how blockchain would be implemented in post. I actually wrote something for Mixing Light a wee while back about that, when blockchain was all hyped up. Essentially, the way that we expect to see blockchain probably implemented and affecting us, the best way to really look at that is to look at what's happening in digital asset management and supply chain logistics. I know that's very unsexy for us creatives, but that's really a lot of how I kind of see how things are being implemented now. So the biggest thing is a thing called smart contracts, and it's very, very cool. And this is kind of a big way that I really see we're going to see the blockchain technology happening, is that smart contracts essentially trigger events happening down the line. So what you could do, for example, is say, as soon as the client hits approve on Frame.io on something, then automatically it triggers the output to be done, the deliverables to be made. And then as soon as those deliverables get uploaded to the client, it also then can trigger the bill to be paid. And so that's one way that smart contracts we might see happening. There's in the music industry and the indie music industry in particular, it's being used for micropayments. So for example, it could be, it's basically a little bit of code embedded into the media itself. So the way that they're doing it in music now is essentially everybody that worked on a track or an album, everybody on the credit roll, for example, every time that is played, every time someone hits play on that piece of media, a few pennies go into the bank accounts of the people that worked on it. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the thing that we've been talking about with content security, the way that we've been looking at implementing blockchain is essentially the way that actually it is used in crypto, which is the one way that crypto is actually kind of relevant. So when we talk about the fact that we only stream content from the cloud where it lives on the servers and the studios, and we only kind of stream it to wherever we are, the blockchain is like a little, imagine like a little text document that kind of goes in, it's embedded in the code of that media. So every time that piece of media is touched by somebody, it gets a fingerprint saying that person touched it, these are the changes they made and when. And so that way, all we'd actually be working on in a studio in the cloud system, anybody touching it is actually just touching the metadata. You're grading something, you're only changing the CDL, the color information, for example, on a shot. You're actually not handling the media at all. You're only basically handling kind of a stream of it or a proxy of it. And then that gets added onto the file as another kind of intermediary layer. And in the blockchain, it tags that Katie took this, made these changes to this at this time. Now, that way we have a lot of things about security. We know who's touched it, when, where, there's accountability, there's payment stuff, there's automatic triggers that can be put on. That's kind of the most likely way that we'll see blockchain implemented in post-production.
So people can work at home.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And that's why I was saying that when people have been talking about studio in the cloud before, one of the reasons why remote at scale hasn't really been implemented at scale is because people have gotten really stuck on this idea of security. And then the answer to that has typically been some kind of blockchain thing, which is not a very mature technology. And how we actually implement that is a bit complicated. And I think that's what's really been keeping our industry from deploying this kind of stuff really elegantly at scale.
Well, and fear of change.
There's that too.
Hollywood is scared, and they always have been, and that's why things are very slow to implement.
So the rest of you panelists, now that Katie has gone through this explanation, what new tools are you interested in? What new technologies are you interested in? Have you implemented any of them? Do you see yourself implementing any of them in the near future?
Well, these are great questions, but it takes me back to the earlier part where we're talking about the editors working at home, and it seems like we're at the point where cloud doesn't really work. It's not ready yet, is what it sounds like. I'm getting the agreement for.
It's not ready for remote. It's ready.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, review and approval, but Avid was showing that in 2000. I have the T-shirt, but I'm looking more at when from the creative side again. When I am working and I can't go out, if I'm working at home, I can't go out and talk to the other people, and I can't have that interaction. That's one factor. I don't know, the interaction with the producer in the room is way different than looking at somebody on a screen. Like this right now, as an editor's lounge, is very difficult for me. It's not the same spontaneous creative interaction that we've had when we're all sitting next to each other and we're picking up from cues off of each other, and
you're just sad
that your
jokes are falling flat.
My what? Oh, no, but I mean, there's a lot of things that we're not talking about okay, so you, Mark, you've handed all you say to the editors, all right, take the system home. Well, here's the difference. If they're at Bunim/Murray working and something just stops working, they can call you and say, I need somebody to come and fix this right away. And it gets fixed pretty fast, okay? But if they're at home on their own, now all of a sudden they have to be their own tech support
Our support team has been working overtime the last couple of weeks, and my hat goes off to them. They are holding hands throughout this whole thing and solving, all the startup problems that everybody's having. So
and yours is probably one of the better situations. We've already seen you're a better company for what you're doing. So most smaller situations, the editor's going to be home. They're going to be on their own. What do they do? Now, there's a bunch of us like, Jeff and I and you who just go and figure our own stuff out. We've had to do it for so long. If you've spent, 3 hours once on the Avid support line, you've had enough of that, right? So you figure out how to troubleshoot stuff yourself. But how many editors I know out there who, they can't even output an EDL. Forget about if something's not working, how did they fix it?
Well, the problem here is not that it breaks. The problem here is that you run out of stuff. You only have a certain amount of stuff that's on your drives. And the next episode, it's back at the ranch. How is that going to happen? That's where the part of the workflow doesn't function in a send it all home.
No, you download it. You do it overnight. If anybody has gigabit local internet connectivity, they can download a shit ton of stuff overnight.
I can't
And-
get to gigabit, and I've got pretty good cable modem. I mean, I've got 300 megs max, and if I've got people who are playing video games and watching. It's not a valid methodology as a long-term solution.
I disagree. But I want to talk to something that Katie said earlier, and she said that machine learning and AI was so last year. She's right and wrong. My New Year's resolution this year was to get all into AI and machine learning and integrate that into our workflow, and this happened. So
Skynet became self-aware.
yeah,
Right.
It was a new thing last year.
yeah.
It was being introduced into our world last year.
Right, but here's my plan. I'll throw this out to the public because you can steal the idea. I have a copyright on it. I wanted to use AI to really get into our workflow with things like clearance, where you can do image recognition, facial recognition, and you could already sort of label and assign stuff that we need to have releases for. You could use GPS coordinates from the footage that was already there to indicate whether we had a release sign for a location that we went into. I even gave this thing a name. I call it Clarence the Clearance Bot. And I was going to create this whole thing where we could put something up into the cloud, use AWS, all their various services, image recognition and speech recognition, all that stuff, and come back with a predefined sort of preliminary version of what we're doing. But it's just hard. I'm not a coder, and it requires somebody to do the code, figure it out, realize that it's not going to be 100%. It might be 90%. Are you, what is that? Are you?
Here, take my Amex, please. That's the problem. I've heard of that where people have said, okay, they put the Amex down for cloud services, and then there's all this cool stuff that could be done. Lots of cool stuff, but the cash register's running. And
Yes.
that's where part of the core problem is. Yes, I can run transcription, and it's going to cost me X amount per hour.
By the way, can you show me that number again, please? And
Yeah, hold that card up again.
Yeah, let's have all everybody see
go.
it.
It's probably Keycode's card. He doesn't care.
and the expiration.
And Kavanaugh's over here going, ah!
Uh,
Guys, we're going to be moving to questions
Okay.
soon.
Go.
So, did
Bring them
anybody
on.
bring them on? Okay, very good. We've had a lot of questions. It's really excellent. So let me get up to the front of the questions. So people are making comments as well.
just
They
ignore
like-
Chris.
Harry's haircut.
Yeah,
Oh.
no haircuts. So one person wants to know if can read access, AKA playing a clip, count as touching the file. I think this
Yes.
is referring to blockchain, and it sounds like it will require new file features.
Absolutely will require new file features, because essentially we have to embed the blockchain file into the media file in some way. And that's been really where we've all gotten a bit stuck, to be honest. So that's been one of the big barriers. And to be honest, I think that it's really important to realize that in our business, we've always, we have to kill our darlings. We've always looked to theater and film and everything for our heroes, and we're not looking at gaming, and we're not looking at tech. And honestly, that's where those problems are being solved. And I think we're a little bit arrogant and insular in that, way, that we're trying to get our own engineers to solve that problem. We're throwing, Jeff's throwing his credit card at Mark and going, give me this AI thing. Mark's not going to solve it. I spent a couple of years really literally embedding myself in the startup machine learning world, and realized that it is so different from our world, and really they do have the answers. We're just not asking them the right questions. So I think that's something that that we need to get over, so that we can actually get over our barriers to progress in this.
Well, Hollywood is noted for being the ocean liner that takes a long time to turn, right?
They do. And the thing is, there's people who are working on this solution. They're working on it from the media asset management side, and media asset management to most editors is a very dirty word. As you can see, Terry, make a noise so you can see his face. He's just, it's like, what are you talking about?
I don't know what you're talking about.
There you go. See,
Back in my living room now.
So should we divide, your next question, should we divide remote editing into pre-picture lock and finishing?
It requires different tools, so yes,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean that it's not possible to do both.
I mean, we already do both and with different tools.
Somebody suggests that we should look at vCinity for distributed remote storage. Anybody familiar with that product?
Nope.
Okay.
Sales guy?
Somebody says, now that the genie is out of the box, more people are jumping to remote work. Yes, I think we talked about it. This is similar to the Tsunami changing tape to file base. The same person said that hardware for solutions is in short supply. Any suggestions on paths for finding the solutions right now?
That's something we've been doing. We've been calling, literally I've had people come in and say, hey, I want to get this thing. And it's like, okay, hey, purchasing, can you reach out to distribution? Can you reach out to people? Where is it in the warehouse? How can we get this thing done? And the people who've got stuff in warehouses that are outside the country, it's difficult.
It's with the toilet paper.
We didn't
Jeff-
flatten the curve.
Jeff, can you talk about the HP RGS solution, because you are on top of that, and everybody that I've been talking to is asking about that, and you seem to be the resident expert on this. Can you address that?
So the thing with the HP RGS solution, our friends at HP came along and they said, okay, we want to be able to control computers in other areas of our facility, and we've got a big supercomputer, like a big Z8 down there, and we want to control it from a laptop. So they built software to do that. They also discovered that they would be able to sell it to people that didn't own HPs. So you can license it. And the thing about being able to license it is you could put it on something you have now. So if it's Mac, you turn it into a boot camp Windows machine. You put the licensing on, and then you can use connection through your VPN to control that edit station. And that's the long and short of it.
So explain what a VPN is. A lot of people don't even know what that is.
Sure. A VPN is a virtual private network. So you are attaching to your house, you're attaching your home computer to the work network in an authenticated manner, which takes care of the security piece for most folks. And you are now given an address like you're, in the office down the hall. However, your connection's limited by it's going over the public internet. So that's why RGS works so well, because it requires only about 20 megabits. Teradici starts at 20, works its way up to 50 and possibly a little further. So getting a low bandwidth solution that can work on hardware you've already got, that's kind of the core. So a lot of people have been looking at, well, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that, and at the end it's like, crap, I'm out of time. And they test this out and they go, well, this works. And that's the problem we ran into with the Ellen Show. They called, Friday at 4 o'clock. It's like, well, we need to get this done. It's like, oh yeah, hey, here's what you can do. No, we've got to get this done because we're off the lot on Monday. So, we literally is like, okay, we'll get you a drive and we'll work on the licensing and get it dialed in now. And they got it dialed in time before they had to walk away. And they got control of an edit system and they can continue working. So that's the core of it.
Mark, there's a lot of comment to your 2 petabytes that you've got. Did you see all those questions?
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to what did Jeff call it? Lift and move.
Lift and shift.
Lift and shift.
No, we're not going to move that to a cloud scenario. And yes, I'm aware that AWS offers an on-prem solution.
$16,000 a month.
Yeah.
So nothing to it.
Yeah. I mean, look, we in reality TV, we're both blessed and cursed by a few things. One of the curses is the massive amount of storage, massive amount of media that we generate. That makes any of these kind of things that we're talking about very difficult to do. We're blessed by the fact that, unlike what Katie's talking about, our level of image quality and acceptance is perhaps lower than most, so we can get away with a lot. It's just difficult.
Right. Terry, a question for you. Somebody asks, how about a digital service station model for upload and download?
We looked into that actually years ago because of once we went to file, because of the tsunami, once we went to file-based stuff, and we couldn't really find a way to make it make sense, because the problem is that people aren't really willing to pay as much for bandwidth. When it was videotape, they went, oh, it's an expensive machine, the tape's expensive, whatever, you just charge us. But when it comes to file-based, they start going, oh, well, I have an internet connection at home. They don't realize that you're paying a fortune for a higher bandwidth connection, et cetera. So we never found a way to really make that work and to charge for it. Basically, it's SohoNet. You go to SohoNet, and that's what you get. That's your version of it. But kind of following up on that with all of the bandwidth, and another person who was asking about doing remote color correction, talk to Nice Shoes. I mean, they're going to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, the thing also, and I had done that discussion with, folks here at Keycode about remote color workflows, because, that's one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. So, they've got a package. Talk to them. They'll tell you what it is.
Mm-hmm.
We did have a question that apparently we've answered, but somebody wanted to talk about remote color and how to do it. Anybody want to sum up our conversation on? There must be somebody late to the conversation.
Yeah.
Go back and watch our earlier discussion.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I'd love to talk about, it sounds like you guys are remoting the Baselight node away from the head.
There's a few different ways that we're doing it,
Okay.
depending on exactly the needs and the base lights and
Yeah, I think
things like that.
we should talk offline. That sounds.
We should talk offline about that. Because unfortunately, it's a proprietary system, can't really give you the secret sauce. But besides, I couldn't explain it, to be honest. It's above my.
It involves a couple gerbils on a little hamster wheel and hidden in the back. Yes.
Yeah, we keep them in engineering. Yeah.
Yes.
So has anyone figured out how to get the remote computer's output locally? Is it another VPN tunneling itself back to me?
Yes. Basically. Yes.
All right, last.
Is that proprietary also?
Yes.
Well, it's not done with the inexpensive solutions. Let's just put it that way. It requires some R&D and some investment and some
Didn't you say something about getting in sync being the key?
Getting in sync is the key. What people are talking about there is the GUI being in sync with the output coming back, and that can be done, but it has to be done at a cost. And I'd had the conversation with the folks at Bebop a while back and said that's the holy grail, get it done.
And
I don't know. I'm not using Bebop right now personally, but not to say that it's not a valid solution for Premier work groups.
Here's one.
For color.
Oh, okay.
For color, for color, we certainly don't have an issue with the lag in the GUI. Where we have a slight delay is because we go essentially, the media comes from the server to the GUI. The GUI also controls the Baselight on site, and that's all going back and forth. And then the delay happens slightly at client side, which is that's that other output, and they have a delay of anything from 2 seconds right now to 20 seconds, depending on their internet connection.
Yeah, and the thing is that can never get perfect because of the laws of physics. It just takes time for things to go from point A to point B. Right.
Yeah. So the GUI thing is definitely solvable. It's and has been solved in this particular iteration, which does not apply to Premiere and Avid editing. It's for Baselight and Resolve and those kinds of high-end things. But it is definitely solvable though. And I hope that Michael and the guys at Bebop can do it, because I think what they're doing is really great.
We have a question about AWS, Amazon Web Services with snowball delivery has been very problematic on several Netflix projects for this person in the audience, with corrupt frames only discovered months later. Do you trust AWS?
Well, that's not an AWS question. That's a Snowball question. Snowball is a physical device that sits there that you load with stuff. So the way to test that is you've got to check Summit. So you put it in and then you checksum it, and if it checksum's fine, you ship it. You don't delete your media until it arrives and has been confirmed.
But he's
Because
saying months.
Media management 101.
snowballs can get damaged in transit. Last thing you want is all your camera originals being gone forever.
All right, before my last question, does anybody want to make a kind of a statement about our conversation tonight and what stood out for them the most?
Well, I will throw in just going back that I think it's really important to have some kind, if you are going to be at home all the time, to have some kind of a support group. And if you're working at Avid, and I'm just using them because they sponsored us tonight, so that's cool. A great place to go is the Avid Editors of Facebook, which you're seeing behind me. And you can get questions answered there really quickly. And the patron saint of Avid, Maria Montague, is always there to help out too. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Excellent. Thank you, Terry.
We all love her.
Yep.
Mark, any?
I just want to underscore the fact I firmly believe that we are seeing a sea change in how post is done between now and in the future, and get ready for that change.
Great.
Yeah, I always have every NAB, and I mentioned this when we first started chatting, as a group of panelists. Every NAB I usually put out after day one what the theme of this year's NAB is.
Right.
You see what the theme is. And this year there was no flaw, and I was like, oh great, the theme's going to be the pandemic. It's not. The theme is remote. The theme is remote because whether we're in NAB or not, that's what we're all talking about the week of NAB. So
Great point.
Good point. Jeff, any closing thoughts?
Sure. I mean, here's the guy that's got to straighten this out. I mean, production and post are at the moment partially a train wreck. And the thing is, once we figure out how to not get the train wreck to happen, we will be better suited for the next time something like this comes down the pike. Because we were caught with our pants down, all of us. And we're going to have to make some decisions, on technology in the future to make sure that we don't get caught like this and that we can continue working. So we need to, don't let history repeat itself. We've got to get ready to do these things. Some of this stuff we're going to keep using on a regular basis because it just simply makes sense and it's part of the creative process, brings more people into collaboration. But the other part is we've got to get ready. We've got to be able to say that, yep, we've got the infrastructure to support this. And that's going to have to be some smart folks figuring out how not to let this happen to us again.
Great. Well, there's a shout out to Blue Collar Post Collective that I am.
Hey!
Blue Collar. So last question, is there going to be an NAB next year? And if so, are you going to attend it?
Can I leave for it now? I mean,
Terry, I know you're not going to be there, right?
No, yeah, I'm already signed off for the NAB list, so yeah, I wouldn't have been there anyways. But is it really relevant anymore?
Well, is it? That's my question. Is it relevant?
Not to me.
yeah,
Jeff, for you it is?
yeah, it's relevant because that's where the people get together to talk about this stuff in general. Yeah, HPA is more specific, but in general, that's where people come from all around the world to sit down and talk about it. NAB and IBC. Those are the big shows, and it's introduced at NAB and it ships at IBC. It's going to be the same thing. It's just we're going to miss this year.
I don't know. The only reason I'm questioning that is because is now the new normal. We don't do these big gatherings anymore. Just I mean, I remember back in, I don't know if it was SARS or MERS or swine flu, but being at NAB and seeing all the Asian people wearing the masks walking around, it was very freaky. And now we're way beyond that. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm still going to the grocery store and there's people wearing masks there.
Yeah.
I would actually suggest that because NAB was cancelled this year, that more people will want to go next year, because I think that a lot of our industry has, we're collaborative people, and we really need to get out of our bubbles and talk to each other and share information and learn from each other. Mm-hmm. And I wonder whether there's a good chance that even the likes of Terry will feel like he really just needs to be around his people. And so I would suggest that there's a good chance that NAB, when it's assuming that we're all good by this time next year and it can go on, I would actually take a punt potentially it being a big one because of the fact that we'll all just feel the real need to see each other.
All right, Mark?
I'm on the fence. I mean, I was going this year, looking forward to it. I was going to do the Avid ACA thing. I hadn't been in a couple of years. But I'm not so sure about next year. I mean, you know, it really depends on the state of the world at that point. I mean, what's to keep this from a similar sort of thing from coming again? So I'm on the fence.
Well, I think that's a good place to end, because I think we are all living in uncertain times. We don't know what's going to happen next week, much less next year. But I'd like to thank all of you for spending your time in your remote places to join us in the very first ever remote Editors Lounge. Are we going to do it again, Terry?
And I really want to, I want to thank all of you, and especially Deborah for once again being an awesome moderator. And thank you, Key Code, that's awesome, and Avid, etc. And most importantly, those of you who are out there who might be infected or having an issue, our thoughts are with you. So hang in there.
Right. And is this going to be, the Editors Lounge is usually put on YouTube, correct, Terry?
Yes, this will be on YouTube.
Do you any idea?
It'll be available immediately because it was a live broadcast. The cut down versions will probably come later.
Great. Thank you so much for adding that, Jeff. Well, again, thank you, panelists. And I'd like to thank all the attendees who signed up and have joined us with their questions and their interest. And we'll see you next year.